What would you do if you had the chance to speak with a residential school survivor? How would you feel? What would you say? What would you ask? Would you be nervous, fearful of asking the wrong thing, or maybe hearing something that you're not ready to hear? Or would you have hope that hearing their story would inspire you and the next generation? And maybe it would even allow you to heal and reconnect with your culture and identity as well. I'm Sophia Smoke, and I have this chance to speak with Doreen Bernard, a residential school survivor, and to honor her story. Join us as we have this conversation together.
My name is Doreen Bernard. My spirit name is Gesadam Dandali Ulnui, which means she loves her Ulnu ways, from Sibeganegri in Mi'kma'ki on the Atlantic coast. I'm a grassroots grandmother. I have 10 grandchildren and a mother of 4. I work with the survivors of the Shubenacadie Indian Residential School.
Well, Doreen, I want to thank you for sitting down with me. I have some questions for you today, and I also have some questions from kids across Canada. In just a week, we received more than 200 questions for you about kids who wanted to hear and know your story. I wanted to talk to you about being a residential school survivor. It's a tough conversation. So how do you feel when people ask you to talk about this part of your past?
Well, before I wouldn't be able to share much about my my time as a survivor in the residential school, but through my healing journey and working with survivors over the last over 20 years, I find it very empowering, I think I would say, to be able to share my story and to help others to tell their story and to not get stuck in the trauma of the story, but also look at their strengths and their resilience.
Well, thank you. I'm so grateful because it's only by your strength and my grandmother's strength and my grandfather's strength that we're still here today. My next question comes from students in Miss Piercy's class from Whitbourne, Newfoundland and Labrador.
My question for Doreen is, what was a typical day like at a residential school?
A typical day, we'd wake up in the morning and go to church before breakfast. And then we would go down from the dormitory to the refectory to eat. And the boys would be on one side and the girls would be on the other side. I remember not being able to wave or acknowledge my brother, sitting on the other side. We weren't allowed to look over on that side. The food wasn't that good. Remember that? I mean, in the school in Shubenacadie, they did starvation experiments with the children there. So I don't know if some of the food that we were getting was part of that experiment or not, but it wasn't very good. Then we'd get up and get ready for school. We did a lot of praying. We'd have rosary in the morning and a rosary at night. They had to say rosaries on your knees and pray. And they would put us to bed at like 7, still daylight out. We weren't allowed to talk or get out of bed. So lots of us peed the bed because we weren't allowed out of our bed. We would get strapping if we got out of the bed to go to the bathroom. And for those that wet the bed, they would make them wash their sheets off by hand in the sink and then stand on a chair and air dry them. Sometimes if they weren't dry by the time we left the dormitory, we'd have to take it down to the refectory and stand on a chair in the middle of where everybody was eating and air dry our sheet or put it over our head. And that was a typical day for me because I was a bedwetter.
Oh, yeah, I think we're getting to a point where we're learning about residential schools. But I think so often we're forgetting that it was just every day. Oftentimes everything that happened was just every day, down to the simple things of not being able to say good morning to your brother, the smallest things that they would do to break you down, because I can't even imagine. I have brothers and siblings of my own. And
It's emotional trauma, yeah. A lot of times that was worse than the physical beating, you know. So sometimes I would get out of bed and go to the bathroom. That way I wouldn't have to do that, be put on display. So I would just get a strapping for getting out of bed. So that was a typical day. And a day didn't go by where that wasn't part of my life there.
lots of kids, especially from Mrs. Perry's class from Centerville, Newfoundland, wanted to know,
were you allowed to have friends and talk to them?
I have lifelong friends from the residential school that were in there when I was there. And we found ways to, talk. Some of them spoke Mi'kmaq, which I didn't, and they would get in trouble for speaking our language. And I would teach them English, We just took care of each other, watched out for each other. And so I did have friends, and a lot of times I wasn't allowed to speak to my brother, but like I said, I was always getting punished for something, even for speaking. I was speaking English and I get in trouble. So they got in trouble for speaking Mi'kmaq, and I got in trouble for speaking English. Just speaking, saying anything. A lot of it was they were trying to teach us, I don't know, the virtue of silence. I don't know what it was. We're supposed to be praying instead of talking. One of the things I think that stands out is when we would be humiliated by the nuns, we wouldn't laugh at each other. We wouldn't give them the same kind of, treatment. You know what I mean? We were being mistreated enough by the nuns that we didn't want to harm each other by laughing, or following the lead of the nuns to humiliation. Yeah, so they would look away. They would look away instead. If we were getting a strap, they wouldn't look on. And if we cried, they wouldn't laugh or anything like that. Kind of took care of one another. Didn't give them the same reaction that they wanted.
so your time at residential school ended when you were 10. Can you take me back to the last day at the school and what you remember about it?
I remember being really rebellious because I knew that we weren't going to go back. And the last day of the school, somebody from the reserve came down to pick us up on June 28th. And we were getting in the car to go to the airport, and Sister Gilberta come running down the stairs, and she said, "Doreen, you forgot something." And she gave me this Bible, and she passed it into the window of the car. And I took it and I threw it, and I told her, "I don't want nothing from here." My sister was really upset. Told me, "Don't do that. Would you?" And I told her, "Well, there's nothing they can do to us. We're leaving this place. We're leaving this place and never coming back." So there was no harm, nothing they could do. And we left, and that was my last day and last minute at that school. That's what I remember.
It's like they tried so hard to get that into your head, but by the time that you were able to leave and just be yourself, it didn't have that kind of effect on you.
No, didn't have that power.
To follow up on that question, students from Miss Trudy's class asked,
Can you describe your healing journey after you left the residential school?
Didn't heal right away, that's for sure. When I left there, I was just turning 11, and I was very angry, and I just went down the wrong path for a few years, and then I became a mother when I was 18. I was a social worker for 10 years, realizing that I still needed a lot of healing myself, and trying to help our families and our children. And it was in my late 30s when I really began walking the red road and changed my life, and ceremony, and doing things that everything was totally new. And it took me a long time to develop my spirituality where something worked for me. So I've been sober for 31 years and following this road, trying to teach as much as I can, you know, about the medicines and about connection to the earth and the water as a water walker and land protector. Just walking my talk and teaching whatever I can. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being a teacher, but also protecting all of these things, like the water that need those special people to do the protecting. After residential school, students in Ms. Chambers' class in North Vancouver, British Columbia wanted to know,
when you did go back to your home, how hard was it to go back to your traditional practices and language?
So we didn't have a lot of teachers, and unfortunately many of the fluent speakers in our community have passed on, and there's not that many. There's maybe 5 out of 2,000 people from our community that actually can speak fluent Mi'kmaq. And we're the closest to the residential school, you know, 5 kilometers away. What was the biggest loss? I would say that, because that's who we are, and that's our culture. And language is really important to who we are. So it's something that I struggle with, but I'm learning. I'm learning to pray in Mi'kmaq, and I'm learning to some words and phrases, and trying to revive that and instill in my grandkids, you know, that it's really important that they learn.
and I often see that with the residential school trauma, it's like we've taken a step down with each generation when it comes to the importance of language. But I'm hoping, and I am seeing, that with the newer generations, we're slowly taking steps back up. So I think it's incredible that you're playing your part in that, in instilling that, the idea of language being so important. You were just a kid when all of this happened to you. If you were face to face with your younger self today, what would you say to her?
I used to think of things that happened was our fault. I shouldn't have said this, or I shouldn't have done that. But today I would tell them that it's not your fault. I would tell myself it's not my fault what they're doing. I think that's my main message would be that you didn't have that power. They took power over you. One of the main themes was for us to find forgiveness, which is one of the hardest lessons, to forgive. But we realized that, you know, it's not, forgiving is not for the person who harmed you, but it's for you to forgive yourself, for you to be able to move on with your life and not carry that same, you know, that same trauma, the way it impacted you back then, that it doesn't have that power over you today. So I think that message was to forgive ourselves, you know, and to forgive that person.
Residential school stories are hard to hear and are obviously so hard to share. Is there anything on your mind, on your heart, that you want to end off this interview with?
Yes, I'd like to tell the youth that they are our leaders. You know, they are the next generation that's going to be there for our younger people coming up. I wanted to tell them that when they live a good life, it makes us all win. They didn't take away our lives. They didn't take away our language and our culture. We lived through them, and they succeed, we succeed. Yeah, they didn't win.